Ja, guten Abend an euch und
Well,
an Sie
good
alle. Ich darf Sie
evening
herzlich
to all
begrüßen
of
zu
you. I would
unserer
like to
neuen
most cordially
Ausgabe von
welcome you
Listen to the East.
to listen
Wir
to
sprechen
the
heute über das
East.
Thema
Today we are
Wege aus
going
Hass
to
und
talk about
Verzweiflung,
ways out
Erfahrungen
of
aus Bosnien und
hatred and
Herzegowina und
despair,
aus der Ukraine.
experiences from Bosnia and
Unser Gespräch
Herzegovina
heute
and
findet statt im
Ukraine.
Vorfeld unserer diesjährigen
Today's
Pfingstaktion,
discussion
die
is held in
Wiedereinführung
the
des
run-up
Modells
to this year's
3800
Pentecost
Plakat.
campaign. So
Unser Leitwort
behind
in
me you
diesem
will
Jahr
see
leider
our
sehr
poster.
aktuell
The
wird lautet:
guiding
Damit Frieden wächst.
motto,
Du
so
machst den
that
Unterschied.
peace
Unsere Aktion jetzt
grows,
in
you
diesem Jahr.
make the
In der ersten
difference.
Maiwoche im Bistum Münster
And
eröffnet
the
wird.
opening will be in the first week of May in the
Heute
Diocese of
schauen wir also
Münster.
mit Bosnien und Herzegowina und der Ukraine auf
Today,
zwei
we are
Länder,
going to
die ihre
focus
Geschichte
on
und vor allem
Bosnia,
ihrer
Herzegovina,
Lage
and Ukraine,
sehr
i.e.,
verschieden
two
sind.
countries which are
Beide leben
very
aber unter
different in terms
unterschiedlichen
of their histories
Gräueltaten.
and
Eine
political
dramatische
situations.
und
Both,
traumatisierende
however, are
Erfahrung, die
linked
Erfahrung
by the
des
traumatic
Krieges.
and traumatizing
Es ist so die schlimmste
experience
Erfahrung,
of
die
war,
einzelne Menschen
the
und
worst
Gesellschaften als Ganzes machen
experience
können.
for
Sie
individuals
prägt das
and
Leben der nächsten
societies as a
Generation
whole.
genauso wie das Leben
It shapes the
zukünftiger
lives of
Generationen.
both the current
Ob dies nun
generation
einige
and
Jahre und auch
future
wenige Jahrzehnte
generations.
zurückliegt, wie in Bosnien,
Whether the traumatization
oder
occurred a few
vielmehr sich jetzt
years ago,
lebt
like
und
in
durchlebt
Bosnia,
wird,
or
wie in der
is
Ukraine.
currently being lived through, like in
Als unsere
Ukraine.
Gesprächspartner heute Abend
As our
begrüße ich sehr
dialogue
herzlich
partner
Olena
tonight, I
Wojcik
would like to
und
welcome
Dana
Olena
Simo-Marsic
Wojcik
und
and
sage
Reverend
nach
Simo
Kiew
Marsic
Dobre Večer
to
und
Kiev,
Dobre
Dobro
Večer nach
večer, and
Sarajevo.
Dobro
Guten
večer
Abend,
to
wir freuen uns,
Sarajevo.
Olena
Good
und Shimo,
evening,
auf unser Gespräch.
Olena and Shimo. I'm very much looking forward to our discussion. Dobro večer. Good evening.
Mit unseren beiden Gästen möchten wir darüber sprechen,
With our two
wie
guests,
es
we
überhaupt
would
gelingen
like to
kann,
talk
aus
about
Hass und
how
Verzweiflung
hatred
in und nach der Erfahrung
and
des Krieges
despair,
Wege zu finden.
based upon the
Wie
experience
es
of
möglich ist,
war,
trotz solcher traumatisierender Erfahrungen
can be overcome. How
Überlebensstrategien
can
zu
we find
entwickeln
ways out? How is
und
it
wie wir als
possible to
einzelne und
develop
Gesellschaft
survival
den Blick in die
strategies
Zukunft richten können,
despite such
auch wenn sich
traumatizing
konkret in
experiences?
Frage stellt.
And how can we look ahead into the future, both as
Wir
individuals
wollen es so
and as a
machen in dieser
society,
nächsten guten
even
Stunde,
if
dass
this
wir
is absolutely in
dann
doubt?
gleich zunächst die beiden
Over the
Statements
next
hören. Es sind
hour,
zwei
we shall
Präsentationen
listen to the
vorbereitet, die wir
two
beide nacheinander
statements. Two
hören. Und dann miteinander ins
presentations have
Gespräch
been
kommen
prepared.
und wir eben
Afterwards, we
unsere
shall
Fragen
have
dem
a
vertiefen können.
discussion in order to drill
Im Fall von
somewhat
Bosnien und
deeper.
Herzegowina, und
When
damit
it comes
beginnen
to
wir dann,
Bosnia and
liegt der
Herzegovina,
heiße
and this is
Konflikt,
where we
dieser
would like to
Krieg in
get
den 90er Jahren
started,
fast
the
30
hot
Jahre zurück.
conflict, this war,
Seit
dates
dem
back almost 30
bekriegsentscheidenden
years
Friedensvertrag von Dayton
since the
1995.
Dayton Peace Agreement,
In
which is
diesem
now
Krieg spielten
controversial, of
Lebensbereiche genau
1995.
genommen
We shall
kulturelle
hear
und
more on the
religiöse
details,
Identitäten
but
und
in this
Zugehörigkeiten eine
war,
große Rolle.
cultural and
Es
religious
gab eine
affiliations and
Instrumentalisierung
identities
dieses
play a
Kampfes
crucial role,
und dieser
as well
Bewahrung
as
und
their
Erweiterung von Macht
instrumentalization
und
when it comes to
Einflusssphären in damals
maintaining and
auseinanderbruchenden Jugoslawien.
increasing political influence in the
Heute reden
former
unsere heutige
Yugoslavia, which
Protagonisten in Bosnien
was
und
falling
Herzegowina, das von
apart.
massiver Abwanderung
Today,
und
about
von großer
3.2 million people live in
Familienarbeitslosigkeit
Bosnia and
geprägt ist.
Herzegovina, which
Es ist
is
ein Land mit einer
characterized by
hochkomplizierten
massive
politischen
immigration
Struktur
and
und es ist ein
unemployment.
Land
It's a
geprägt von
country
einer
with a highly
geteilten Gesellschaft,
complicated
in
political
der
structure,
muslimische
a
Bosniaken,
divided
Serben
society
und
of
Kroaten leben.
Muslim Bosniaks, Serbs,
Ich
and
darf unsere
Croats.
Gesprächspartner
Now,
kurz
I
vorstellen.
would like
Dr.
to briefly
Simo Marsic
introduce our
kennen wir
dialogue
uns nun aus
partner,
verschiedenen
Reverend
Kämpfen und
Simo
Begegnungen.
Marshix. We know each
Er
other
wird
well from a number of
1977 in
encounters. He
Vidovice
was
im
born in
Nordbosnien geboren.
1974 in
Danach
Vidovice
hat er
in
Abitur,
northern
das Studium der
Bosnia.
katholischen Theologie in
After
Sarajevo
taking his
und
I
im Zivildienstjahr
levels,
eingetreten,
he
wurde dann
entered the
Stellvertretendes
seminary in
Reichserzbistum Sarajevo
Sarajevo.
eingeweiht.
He
Nach
was
dem Studium der
then
Theologie hat er in Rom
the
eine
priest
Promotion
there.
im
After his
pastoraltheologischen Thema
studies,
verfasst.
he
Er ist seit
also
2004 Professor für
graduated in
Pastoraltheologie
pastoral
in Sarajevo
theology, and ever
und
since
gleichzeitig seit
2004,
2004
he
Leiter
has
des
been
sich noch
professor
viel
of
bekannten
pastoral
Jugendhauses
theology at the
Johannespaul
seminary of
II.
the Archdiocese of
Shimo,
Sarajevo. He's also
herzlich
the youth
willkommen. Was
pastor
sollte
of the
ich noch sagen?
Sarajevo EB and
Das
the
freut mich auf
director
deinen
of the Youth
Beitrag
Center
und
John Paul
auf
II
deine
Sarajevo. So much about this. By means of
Annäherung
an
an unser
introduction, we
Thema
are very much looking
Wege
forward
aus
to your
Hass und
presentation
Verzweiflung.
and the way
Bitte
you
sehr.
are going to share your perspective on ways out of hatred and despair. Dear Thomas, thank you very much. I would also like to welcome you most cordially, Olena, and all those that do participate tonight. Thank you very much for this opportunity to describe the situation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and also the current situation that we are facing. The topic is ways out of hatred and despair. From 1991 to 1995, Bosnia and Herzegovina was characterized by a war which resulted from the collapse of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, the consequences of which can still be felt today. The causes of the war, which began with the collapse of the Republic of Yugoslavia, reach far back into the past. That's very important to note this. It is thus necessary to also consider the historical context when analyzing the causes of the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we also need to assess how different periods and events have shaped the frequent conflicts in this region and beyond. The three ethnic groups, and Thomas just mentioned it, that participated in this conflict, Croats, Serbs, and Muslim Bosniaks. And between them, there's been a lot of tension and mistrust, and all this would influence the reconciliation process. The causes and factors that influenced the events in the 1990s and would still have an impact today are disagreements about the common future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which even today is evident in the separatist tendencies of some politicians in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The current situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is thus characterized by a divided society without a common vision for the future and progress. One of the consequences of the war are new monoethnic communities, because during the war there was ethnic cleansing. So that means even young people did not have any opportunity to get to know their peers of other religions and ethnic groups. The great social challenge, thus, is to offer people a perspective for peaceful coexistence, regardless of their ethnicity and religion. In a traditional society like Bosnia and Herzegovina, religion has always had a great importance to most population groups. Therefore, religious communities today play a very important role in the lives of people in Bosnia and Herzegovina on the path towards reconciliation, and this will certainly continue to be the case in the future. Abuses of religion take place in the political life of Bosnia and Herzegovina on a daily basis. Thus, politics is often entangled with religious communities, and representatives of national political parties would very often use religion in order to achieve their political goals in Bosnia and Herzegovina. According to the most recent census in Bosnia and Herzegovina, about 50% of the population are Muslim Bosniaks, about 30% are Serbs, and 15% would be Croats. However, when taking a closer look at the statistics by religious affiliation, then again 50% of the population would be Muslims, 30% Orthodox Christians, and 15% are Catholics. These data clearly indicate how closely national and religious identities are linked in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this is yet another reason how religion's also been exploited for political purposes. The Dayton Agreement, which was signed in 1995, brought peace after 4 years of war and terrible crimes committed on the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Even though the agreement stopped the conflicts of Bosnia and Herzegovina, it divided Bosnia and Herzegovina into two entities, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Republic of Srpska, and the Brčko district, which has created problems regarding the functioning and stabilization of relations within the state. And even after 29 years, the same political parties continue to be leading in the state, and based upon their agendas, they make a contribution to the dysfunctionality of state structures and to the ever-growing division of the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And exactly that might be identified as one of the risks for a new conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Separatist tendencies of politicians who, by means of radicalization by Arab countries and through the influence from Russia, want to contribute to a separation of a part of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this might ultimately cause potential conflicts in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Still, it is also important to mention that Bosnia and Herzegovina is currently on its way towards the European Union. And the European integration of Bosnia and Herzegovina is being strengthened. The European Union has given the green light for the opening of accession negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this is a major indication of hope for us. Of course, Bosnia and Herzegovina still has many steps to go before accession. We are fully aware of that. This is still an important, a positive step for the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which brings hope because all politicians agreed to follow up on this. One of the most important challenges of today's Bosnian and Herzegovinian society is for each individual, regardless of religious affiliation, to take responsibility for creating an awareness that the evil of war shall not be repeated. Based upon the law on freedom of religion and also based upon the legal position of churches and religious communities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, churches and religious communities in Bosnia and Herzegovina do have the status of a legal entity. That was different during the period of communism. That's something new for us. But based upon this status, they have the right to establish companies, institutions, and associations. They have rights equal to those of institutions established by the state or other authorized founders, and to act in their respective activities, and they are also entitled to manage these institutions independently and directly in accordance with the law. I would like to mention two initiatives which are a sign of hope towards this process of reconciliation. I think there's a number of such efforts made. Also, the Catholic schools, the Catholic Church, even during the war, initiated this process. And also many non-Catholic young people were happy to join. So at the state level, one of the best non-religious institutions with the mission of an interreligious dialogue and peace work is the so-called Interreligious Council in Bosnia and Herzegovina. IRC. This council was founded in 1997 with the combined efforts of Effendi Mustafa Ceric, the Islamic community in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Metropolitan Nikolai, the Serbian Orthodox Church, Vinko Cardinal Poljic, the Catholic Church, and Mr. Jakob Finci, the Jewish community of Bosnia and Herzegovina. While the original idea of establishing the council, which was the first to be known worldwide under this name, was reconciliation between the peoples of Bosnia and Herzegovina, where just 1.5 years prior to the establishment of the council, there was still war. The council carries out a number of different projects related to dialogue, peace building, and reconciliation. The council in Bosnia and Herzegovina has also formed a network for interfaith cooperation and also established a total of 15 committees in different cities. In all groups of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have religious leaders who work and operate and also organize the group work on various problems in the local communities. The goals and objectives of the association are based on the fact that each of our traditional and churches and religious communities teaches the fact that the value of human beings is a God-given gift. In their own way, our faith and religions call for tolerance, recognition of diversity, and the respect for the basic human rights of every single person. Our religious and spiritual traditions share a number of common values. The second initiative is the John Paul II Youth Center, founded by the Catholic Church, which is a place where young people have the opportunity to grow in their faith, to meet someone with a different perspective, and also to receive informal education. The main mission of the center is spirituality, encounters, and education. The most important project in order to promote peace and reconciliation is the project called Let's Step Forward Together. Interreligious and peace projects. And based upon the very important role of religion, I do mention this project because it is an initiative of the Youth Center and a Christian Orthodox priest in the city of Sarajevo, where it was initiated back in 2013. Together, we found that young people very often do not have the opportunity to get to know their peers who come from different religious backgrounds. And thus, based upon this lack of knowledge and know-how, they would develop prejudices vis-à-vis certain ethnic or religious groups. These prejudices can lead to future conflicts if their opinions and views would not change. Thus, the main aim of this project is to encourage young people of the main religions in Bosnia and Herzegovina to develop a sense of responsibility for their own country and to discover the richness, the wealth of diversity, simply by encouraging mutual learning in order to jointly promote a culture of peace and a better future. The work of religious institutions is crucial in post-conflict countries, and religious institutions require the help of other institutions in the country. And it is only through common efforts that it can be expected that something would change at a higher level. Above and beyond that, in my opinion, the work done by young people in peace initiatives is of utmost importance, and this is what we see in this interreligious project. And young people have always played a key role in the peace building process, and they will continue to do so in the future. So much about this. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Dear Shimo, thank you very much for this overview of the current situation of your country, today's situation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and you also provided an outlook. What does this country need for a dialogue in society and for the different ethnic communities? So let's just leave it as is for the time being, and let's proceed and let's take a closer look at Ukraine and Olena Wojcik. We all know the pictures and images from the media, a cruel war of aggression on Ukraine for 26 months, but only few might be able to imagine what this means. Olena Wojcik works for Caritas Space, the Roman Catholic Caritas in Ukraine. Over 30,000 soldiers, also a number of Russian soldiers driven into this war, and the number of wounded, abused, and killed civilians in Ukraine is almost impossible to determine. We might state that Ukraine suffers from the imperial madness of the Russian president, who ultimately would also kill people of his brother country, causing suffering. So this regime causes unspeakable human suffering, leaves behind deep traces of traumatization, torn families, abducted children, psychological wounds for generations. Hate is a harsh word, but it has a place where human life is destroyed in this way. Let me briefly introduce Olena Wojcik. She was born in the village of Churche in Volhynia, if I'm informed properly. This is situated in the northwest of Ukraine. You studied German at the Philological Faculty of German Language and World Literature in Kiev. And for more than 20 years, you have been closely connected to Caritas Space as a translator, as an interpreter, as a project manager. For quite some time, you have been the head of the Caritas Space Project Department in Kiev. Thus, you are a project partner of Renovabis. And you are very close to the people who are victims of this war, because Caritas Space supports a number of such projects. And thus, I would like to give the floor to you to provide some insights into the situation from your perspective. Now, the floor is yours. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you to all the guests. That's really very important for us, for Ukraine, to have the opportunity to talk about the situation in our country. I hope that you can see my presentation. 785 days of the Great War, actually 2 years, 1 month, 22 days. Now, very often people ask, can we negotiate matters with Russia? Yes or no? To me personally, this is not an easy question. On the one hand, just like other Ukrainians, I would like this war to end as quickly as possible. And after this massive firing, whenever children die, I personally am prepared to do everything in my power to ensure that this murderer leaves the country. I'm prepared to do everything that they would never ever get back again. On the other hand, though, we all know this will just increase the appetite of the enemy. Once he's eaten enough, he will be hungry again and will try to get an even greater piece of the pie. And once he's done with Ukraine, he will move to other countries, Poland, Baltic states, Germany. Ukraine has become a protective shield against Russia for Europe as a whole and also for the NATO member states. And also everyone, including the NATO member states that border neither Russia nor Ukraine, would know that they will also have to enter the war if Russia moves ahead and attacks the Baltic states or Poland. For 10 years, my people has defended the borders at the expense of their own lives. Giving up one part of Ukraine means to betray all those that used to fight, that are still fighting today. And in all the countries worldwide, there is the rule not to negotiate with terrorists. Russia, to begin with, needs to withdraw from Russia, must stop the firing of kindergartens, schools, and hospitals. Only then can we get together with them and talk about how to restore peace. Ways out of hatred and despair. Do such ways actually exist? Ukrainians want justice. And while we've seen that the world supports us, it would reduce the hatred vis-à-vis the aggression. We don't want Russian children to die, but we want the perpetrators to be punished fairly. This means absolute sanctions for the country of the aggressor. This means that Russia's actions need to be condemned publicly. It means that we say that Ukraine has been at war for 10 years. It's not a conflict. It means material and spiritual support for the Ukrainians. Everyone is tired of the war in Ukraine. So this is what we keep hearing, in particular in Europe. But that has not changed the situation. By contrast, the situation is getting worse and worse. Also, winter will be the worst we thought, but now actually the times ahead of us are even worse. And Russia gets away with everything and is becoming more and more outrageous. More and more civilians are dying. Children are dying. Yesterday there was another bombardment. More than 10 people were died, including children. And just imagine what will happen to Europe if the Ukrainians get tired too and would give up. We might also briefly talk about the consequences of the war. According to the UN, more than 10,000 people, more than 10,000 civilians were killed, more than 500 children, more than 20,000 were injured, 1,000 of whom were children. More than 31,000 soldiers were killed. That's just official figures. The actual figures are still much higher. More than 6 million Ukrainians have fled the country ever since the beginning of the war. Again, including about 2 million children. The number of internally displaced persons in Ukraine is estimated at 5 million, half of whom are children. The issue of psychological trauma is an issue that not everyone has been aware of, but everyone keeps telling us that very soon this will be a major issue for Ukraine as a whole. There are many psychological, physical disabilities. There's destroyed regions, destroyed villages, destroyed infrastructure, and of course, the Ukrainian economy is absolutely destroyed. But from where do we draw hope? The Ukrainians would draw hope from their children, from our children. We want our children to grow up in their own home. We want them to be able to speak their own language, to learn about their own history. And we are just fighting for them, for our children. And we don't have a choice. That's our home. Space, our organization is called Caritas Space. Space is Latin and means hope. Caritas is a religious mission, and we do not just provide social support, but we would also bring hope for everyone. And Ukrainians also find hope in God, in prayer, like the crucified Christ, who knew why all the suffering was necessary. In these pictures, you can see my colleagues. They are in the bomb shelter. And as you can see, we would also work there. We would really have to go to the bomb shelters several times per day, but we have not lost hope. As you can see, we would still laugh occasionally, and we would continue to help people. And this is one of my favorite quotations of Mother Teresa. We feel that everything that we do is just a drop in the ocean, but if it were not for this drop, the oceans would lack it. And we would also provide intense humanitarian support by means of food kits, hygiene kits, vouchers, financial support, psychological support, but also in terms of winter preparation for internally displaced people and also for poor people. We organize shelters. We also build temporary homes for internally displaced people, for people whose homes have been destroyed. We also provide rehabilitation and support for ill children, for veterans and their families. We render a number of different services here. Now, the reconstruction project has become very large. We have a great need for providing support here. Also, we do this in a number of different regions. Then there's the Livelihood Project, which is new. In particular, we support internally displaced persons to find a new job, and we also provide support to agriculture for those people who live in rural areas. I would like to thank you all for your support, and I hope that you have understood everything that I was saying. I hope it was brief and concise enough, because I might want to provide many more details on Caritas Space. I'd be happy to provide more details. Please get in touch with me via Renovabe so that we can discuss that in greater detail. Olena, thank you very much. Thank you for providing the insights in the situation, in the work done by yourself and Caritas. That's been very moving, and it's not easy to have an eyewitness speaking from Ukraine. It's not easy to continue this talk. Now, we have about 30 minutes now for the discussion, and I would like to kindly ask you to ask any questions that you might have. Just ask any questions that you might have, or also provide comments and make statements. You might also want to use the chat. Let me just check. For the time being, this is not the case. So one question to Shimo. In October, with a group from the Diocese of Münster, we visited the High Representative of the international community. This is Christian Schmidt. He said, this country, Bosnia-Herzegovina, is lacking something like a common reconciliation vision across different communities and ethnic groups. They would all have their own perspective and they would all get the most out of their situation. How could such an overarching reconciliation perspective look like? Is it conceivable and feasible in this very difficult situation, Bosnia and Herzegovina? Now, this is a very good question. Prior to the pandemic, there was a meeting in the European Commission, and the people from the European Union that worked in the European Commission in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So a number of people invited us to this meeting and said we made major investments in a number of different peace initiatives in this state. But we did not expect you and the different religious communities. But now, as already mentioned, Bosnia-Herzegovina is a very traditional society, and for many people, religion plays a key role. So we were invited to this meeting, and we were told that they wanted to provide support in this peace process in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I believe that religion in Bosnia and Herzegovina can make a major contribution. Now, how to put it, to fostering the peace process, because once it gets organized by a religion, by an association, by the Orthodox, Catholic Association, or the Islam community, then they would trust us. They place trust and confidence in us. In particular, if we have this encounter between young people and older people, young people being the beacon for the future. So this common vision might come from there, but it might also come from political unification and higher level initiatives. For instance, I do remember something that we did a few years ago. 50 imams, priests, cardinals, Orthodox bishops got together and we visited all the places where people had been killed, be it Croats, Serbs, or Muslims. So I think we visited 3 different places, all the Jews that had been killed during the Second World War. So again, we visited all these places and we also were saying prayers there as a community. So the media reported on this, which was good, and the media wondered when would politicians also embark on such a mission, because you also mentioned it, Thomas, it's the individual initiatives of different communities, but also a political initiative would be considered to be a beacon of hope. Of course, we are making small steps, so it's an indication of hope, and this, based upon our activities, allows us to show that a better future is possible indeed. Thank you. Now, I asked you to ask questions, and we have received a number of different questions via the chat. one very interesting question is, how can you in Ukraine learn from the experiences in Bosnia? So there was also the dead people on the market square in Sarajevo, so the idea of a never-ending war, but the war came to an idea by means of a military action. It is also settled by means of an agreement. So despite its cruelty, the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina ended. But would that also be a beacon for you in Ukraine? For the time being, it's not conceivable how the war might end and how, in a best case scenario, a fair peace can be restored in your country, Olena. Now, hope is like a wave. Sometimes it seems that very soon there will be peace. We get news that things have calmed down. But after this period of silence, something very, very bad happens. And we all expected to have a very difficult winter. Everyone purchased food, generators, so we were prepared. But winter was pretty calm. It was time to breathe. We just thought maybe peace would be restored. But now there is spring, new attacks which are even worse, even more frequent. And the infrastructure would suffer to an increasing extent, but also even more destruction of residential properties with people living there. The last months, the situation was even worse than it was last year. And when reading all this news, then I personally would lose hope. So thus, I shall try not to read all this news. I try to just read the most important news only. So it's complicated. And then we would also get news from our friends and acquaintances who are at war at the front line. We all have someone who is at war, and then we get awful news.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. This brings me to a somewhat more practical question, and I think you can probably answer that because with Caritas Space, you organize a lot of practical help and support. The support that you provide for the victims of the war in particular, how can this be quantified? How many people would you reach? What are your target groups? This is what we'd be interested in. The first year of the Great War, our target group was internally displaced people. Now we try not to distribute too many food packages, and it's not so many people that would be in the shelters anymore. But we would like to give back hope to people. And we try to return to a normal situation. So we initiated the reconstruction project so that people can return, so that they can live in their own house, in their own town or village. We support people in a specific program in which we provide tools and seeds so that they can work in their gardens. We provide mini grants so that people can renew their business. Many people tell us we are very, very grateful for the food that you provide, for the financial support, but we do not wish to be beggars. We wish to be independent. We would like to work. A white woman told me in the past, I had a hairdresser's shop. Whenever I get the support of Caritas, then I can buy equipment, provide jobs for other people. And thus we have now started to focus on such projects. And of course, children. Children, that's our future. And for us, it's also important to provide psychological support. Again, we would organize holidays in Ukraine, in central and western Ukraine, and also abroad. In the past, we hardly did that, but now many more children are sent abroad for 10 days, for 14 days, so that they can relax, sleep calmly. And of course, there would always be psychologists who support them. But we do not talk about it because in Ukraine, people are not yet used to asking for the help of psychologists, even though focus groups clearly indicate there's the need for psychologists. But people tell us they need food, they need support to pay for services, to pay for medicine, but no one would say, I need psychological help. But whenever we talk about problems, then people tell us emotionally, I'm stressed out, I can't sleep, I'm exhausted. And this is the reason why we do integrate psychological support in many of our programs, but we don't refer to it as psychological support, social work, we would say case managers, social work. And also we have many orderlies and priests, many sisters in our Caritas centers who also provide support, who have a psychological background and would also support us. So this is our main task for the time being.
Ja, du hast also gerade sehr gut beschrieben,
Thank you, Olena. You
wie
have
das
just
überhaupt sozusagen
greatly
die Adressaten oder
described how
Hilfesucher in
children
solchen Fällen
and
zur Hilfe oder
young
wichtig sie sind für
people
euch
are the
oder
ones that get your
welche
support and help,
Ausmaß
and how
unterscheiden die Tools
important that
gehen
is
oder
in
kommt es
order
zum
to
Beispiel
find
dann
ways
auch
out
nicht
of
nur,
hatred and despair.
du hast in deinem
Now,
Beitrag
getting
gesagt,
back
wie
to
wichtig
you, Shimo, in
Beitrag
your
der jüngeren
presentation, you said
Generation
how
für den Dialog
important
zwischen den
it
Kulturen
is
und
to have the
den
contribution of the young
Bürgerinitiativen in
generation for an
Bosnien-Herzegowina ist.
interreligious
Gleichzeitig hast du
dialogue, a
erwähnt,
dialogue between and among the different
massenweise,
ethnic
es ist
communities
so,
in
viele
Bosnia and
junge Menschen das Land
Herzegovina.
verlassen haben
All
oder
at the
das Land
same time, many
perspektivisch
young people
gesehen.
left the countries because they lacked the
Wo jetzt
perspective
jetzt die
there.
Europäische
I
Bosnien und
mean,
Not
in
für Land und
Bosnia and
Leid wirtschaftlich
Herzegovina,
überleben und
how do
sozusagen
young people
hoffen, wieder
muster
eine
the
Hoffnung
courage to stay in the
verwirklichen, dass
country
es doch
and
eine mehr
to
friedlichere
realize
Welt
their
gibt und
hopes that at
weniger
some point in
Spaltung
time the
in dieser
division can
Gesellschaft
be
ist?
overcome,
Und was
also
ist
the
das konkret der
division
Beitrag von
of
euch
this
für den
society? What's the
Jugendaustausch?
concrete contribution made by your youth center? That, of course, is very important. And we, of course, have a number of young people with whom we've been working for a long period of time, and then they would ultimately leave the country. They would lack the perspective, but it's also about the division of the country on the one hand. On the other hand, however, it is also about the fact that they would not get a job and thus they take the decision to leave the country. What we have tried to do is to talk much more about Bosnia and Herzegovina as a country in which you can live, so that John Pope II, right after the war, when he was in Bosnia and Herzegovina, said that the young people need to see their own future in their own children, and they need to make an effort to create a better future together with others. And I think that's very important. Young people can't do it on their own. What we need is synergies. between different institutions so that young people can be encouraged. We would also make a contribution to this as the Catholic Church. We support those that wish to stay. Also, when Novabis provides support in order, for instance, to get some education in agriculture, for example. But it's just a small step, but everything depends upon these small steps. Time and again, we try to also involve local political representatives. We want them to join in, to make a contribution as well. It's important for young people to see that different institutions make an effort for them to stay. Of course, much more could be done at the level of politics, but still, also we are now an accession state of the European Union, and this might be a good thrust for the future. And once young people understand that there are perspectives for them, then based upon our initiative in the Youth Center, they will understand that only together we will be able to develop a country that lives in tolerance and peace. So that means we need to get the encouragement from a number of different institutions. Now, also younger families have now taken the decision to stay in the country, and they got a job, and thus they also provide a new perspective for the future, a perspective for a new future. So that means these families got support, they decided to stay, and they would take action themselves. Now, it's important to better understand this, which of course is very important for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Many young people have left the country, but still there are others that have mustered the courage to stay and also shape the development. This brings me to yet another question, which is also very important. And just a few weeks ago, in March, Pope Francis encouraged Ukraine to enter peace negotiations. He had also done so at an earlier point in time. That, I think, was a difficult invitation for people in Ukraine. Now, how have you experienced that both in your personal and professional life? How was this received, or would people have a different mindset in terms of how to deal with this conflict, this war, which has so few perspectives to end? Very often we would say, at some point in time, everything will come to an end, and also this war will come to an end eventually. Pope Francis said that Ukraine needs to show the white flag. The first response was that people were outraged, not just the civilians, but also the priests. And I also heard interviews with Catholic bishops and people believe that it was not Ukraine that started the war. Why should then Ukraine raise the white flag? We're just defending ourselves. Russia needs to consider that. Russia needs to leave. Russians need to leave, and then we can talk. It seems that the Pope might not know the history, but it caused a lot of indignation when people say Ukraine must not shoot, but Russia may. Now the situation in Gaza or in Israel, NATO responds immediately. NATO protects immediately. Why can't NATO protect Ukraine? This is something that we do not understand. That's a different, very important discussion, which we cannot embark on at this point in time. I've got a different question getting back to young people, because their perspectives, their survival will is very important. Now, Shimo, you are very much experienced in the exchange with young people, based upon the experience in the young center. In practical terms, you might be further down the road, maybe, but how important is it? How likely is it to have a more intense exchange with young people from Bosnia and Ukraine? Like how to deal with experiences of violence, how to find ways out of it, and how to come up with survival strategies. Are there any such considerations? Are there any such experiences? I personally know that some refugees came to Bosnia and Herzegovina who went to Medjugorje, our pilgrimage site. And I know that a proper contact was established with Medjugorje. And I believe that when it comes to the exchange between Medjugorje and Ukraine, then this is also an exchange of experience. Officially, there is no such initiative. This might well be interesting. It's now 30 years after the war in our country. I fully understand what Olena has been saying about the situation there. I was in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war. And I do remember that people talked about the war, had numerous ideas about it, but I always remember what we heard in Zagreb by the cardinal in his sermon, and he said, once the Serbs burnt down your houses, don't do it to Serbian houses. They destroyed your churches, but don't you destroy the churches of the Serbian Orthodox churches. It was not an easy thing for him to say so during the war, because the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia was very difficult indeed. Or, for example, in Sarajevo, with the Catholic Schools Center, we welcomed everyone. So we came up with such initiatives which were looking into the future. Now, it is very difficult to look into the future of Ukraine, but this future will come now or later. And I mean, we actually expected everything to be okay after the war, but it was not. It's a very cumbersome piece process. And in Bosnia and Herzegovina, even after 30 years, we've been working on this. I personally believe that this is our mission as Catholic Church. This is what we need to do. We have not been doing so for political reasons. It is the mission of the Catholic Church as Christians together with the Orthodox Christians in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also with Muslims together. We need to create this country so that everyone would feel at home, and that is difficult, and it will continue to be difficult. Thank you, Shimo. I would rather see this as some sort of a concluding statement, because you mentioned something very important. You talked about the dialogue in your country. In 2 weeks' time, you will also join us in Cologne, and you, on the occasion of different events, will talk to young people and might also establish a new context there. My last question for now is to Olena in Kiev. It's not for us to give advice to you, but so the question to you, what's your message to us, to all the participants today? What's urgent in Ukraine? What can we do based upon our restricted resources? And what can be the message for the Pentecost activity to be started in 2 weeks? Please stay with us. Once we feel this support, then this is also great hope for us. It is so important to feel that we are not alone in this war. It is important to feel that we have friends, that we have people who, in any case, help us, support us. Now, in the chat part, Chris Arnold from Poland, I met him last year. And also, when hearing what our friends have said, and when also seeing that they provide support, then we can continue. We are willing not to sleep at night, to sit in the corridors at night, to work 12 hours a day. But without this feeling of solidarity, we will lose hope very soon. Thank you, Elena. That's a clear-cut message, a wish that we all understand, to stay with you in this very difficult, traumatizing situation in Ukraine. I would like to close this meeting after a good hour. We have listened to the East. We have listened to 2 countries that we have close ties with, to Ukraine in particular. Thank you so much to Sarajevo. Thank you to you, Shimo. Thank you to Kiev, to Elena. Thank you for providing evidence. We are very much looking forward to see you both in Münster and in Cologne in 2 weeks' time, so that we can spread the word, so that peace can grow. You make the difference. And I would like to thank all those of you who have participated today, who have also been involved in the discussion via the chat. And I do hope that you can take back these messages for you in your individual situations of life. Thank you. Have a nice evening and goodbye. Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you, Shimo. Thank you. Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you to all of you.